Chapter 1: The Invitation. The air inside the van was thick with the smell of stale coffee, nervous sweat, and the ozone tang of overworked electronics. Chloe Vance hunched over her laptop, the glow illuminating the determined set of her jaw and the dark circles under her eyes. Beside her, Javier Jax Romero, frontman and self-proclaimed leader of their outfit, Phasmatic Explorers, practically vibrated in his seat, bouncing his knee as he stared out the grimy windshield at the monolithic structure looming before them. St. Jude's Hospital for Incurable Afflictions, or, as the hushed local legends and morbid online forums called it, the Pathogen Ward. It stood silhouetted against the bruised twilight sky, a monument to suffering left to rot. Decades ago, whispers claimed St. Jude's wasn't just treating diseases, it was creating them, or perhaps awakening something worse. Diseases that didn't just kill but manifested, twisting flesh and reality until the entire West Wing was sealed, abandoned, and struck from official records like a dirty secret. Perfect fodder for Phasmatic Explorers. "All right, Phasma fans," Jax boomed, adjusting the body cam harness strapped across his chest. He flashed a wide, predatorily charming grin at the small camera lens clipped near his shoulder. "Tonight's the night. St. Jude's Pathogen Ward. They say nobody who goes in comes out sane, or at all. We're about to test that theory live." Chloe glanced at the stream preview window on her screen. The chat was already scrolling at a dizzying pace, a waterfall of usernames and emojis. User 482 Spectre, do ITJAX, GON. Ghost GRRL 99, OMG be careful. I heard things eat PPL there. Skeptic Steve fake, it's just an old building. Donation, $10 from Ghoul Hunter X, show us something real tonight, Jax. Audio levels look good, Chloe murmured, adjusting virtual sliders. Benny, check your feed. In the back, surrounded by pelican cases and tangled cables, Benny Carter grunted acknowledgement. He was a solid wall of a man, the team's muscle, gear hauler, and resident skeptic. He meticulously checked the connections on his own body cam, his expression carefully neutral. Feeds green, Chloe. Battery pack fully charged. Headlamp functional. Standard sweep protocols engaged. Benny believed in protocols, in redundancies in the tangible world. Ghosts, manifestations, spectral contagions, that was Jax's department. Fueled by viewer clicks and Chloe's reluctant technical enabling. Drone prepped, Jax asked, eyes gleaming. Peregrine is ready for launch, Chloe confirmed, gesturing to the sleek quadcopter nestled in its foam cradle. Full battery, strong signal link for now. Dave's monitoring from the access road 2 clicks back. He's got the long-range comms. Drone operator Dave, their remote eye in the sky, preferred staying well clear of the actual alleged haunting zones. Chloe couldn't blame him. Jax clapped his hands together. Showtime. Benny, grab the primaries. Chloe, keep that stream stable. Remember the plan. Breach through the old laundry chute access. Maintenance schematic Maya dug up says it should bypass the main sealed entrances. We go in, sweep the ground floor, maybe dip into the sub-level if viewer donations hit the basement terror goal, and get out before sunrise or before. He trailed off, letting the implication hang for the camera. Benny hefted 2 heavy-duty flashlights and a pry bar, his face impassive. or before the asbestos gives us mesothelioma. Let's move. Chloe took a deep breath, her fingers flying across the keyboard, bringing the mainstream feed live with their intro graphics, pulsating biohazard symbols and distorted hospital corridors set to an unsettling synth track. "We are live," she announced, her voice tight. "Main feed running, Jackscam primary, Bennycam secondary. Drone launch on your mark." "Launch the bird," Jax commanded, throwing open the van door. The chill evening air cut through the fog. He strode towards the looming building, his body cam bobbing, offering the stream a dramatic low-angle shot of the Pathogen Ward's decaying facade. Broken windows gaped like empty eye sockets. Grime and ivy crawled up the brickwork like diseased veins. Chloe initiated the drone launch sequence. Outside, the Peregrine whirred to life, its navigation lights blinking before it ascended smoothly, angling its camera down to capture Jax and Benny approaching the shadowed base of the building. She switched the main feed to a picture-in-picture, Jax's boots crunching on gravel, the drone's aerial view, and the frantic scroll of the chat. "Nightcrawler 666, yes, here we go." "Concerned Mom 82, please be safe, boys. My Timmy loves your channel." Donation, $20 from Dr. Acula, find patient 0. Benny located the rusted metal square of the laundry chute access hatch, half hidden beneath overgrown bushes near the foundation. It looked like it hadn't been opened in 50 years. He jammed the pry bar into the seam, grunting with effort. Metal groaned in protest. "Get that camera right in there, Benny," Jax urged, positioning his own cam for a close-up. "Let the Phasma fans feel the struggle." With a final heave and a shriek of tortured metal, the hatch popped open, revealing a dark, square hole descending into blackness. A gust of foul air puffed out stagnant, thick with the scent of decay, dust, and something else. Something vaguely chemical and organic, like old disinfectant failing to mask decomposition. Chloe wrinkled her nose, even miles away in relative safety. No, not miles, just meters, she reminded herself, gripping the edge of her console. The smell seemed to crawl out of her speakers. "Creepy pasta fan, smells like death lol." "Urbex junkie, that's the smell of history, and probably black mold." "Spooky Sue, I got chills already." "All right, team," Jax whispered conspiratorially into his mic, peering down the chute. "Point of no return. Benny, you first, check stability." Benny shone his powerful flashlight beam down. It illuminated a steep, grimy metal slide disappearing into darkness. He tapped the edges. "Seems solid enough. Rusted to hell but holding. Hope you got your tetanus shot, Jax." He swung his legs into the opening, grasped the edges, and slid down, his light momentarily swallowed by the gloom before reappearing at the bottom, maybe 15 feet below. "Clear," his voice echoed faintly. "Floor's solid. Smells worse down here, though, like old bandages and chemicals." "Authenticity," Jax declared to his camera, then turned to Chloe through the open van door. "Keep eyes on everything, Chloe. Alert us to any anomalies, chat reactions, big donations, you know the drill." He gave a thumbs up, then swung himself into the chute and vanished with a metallic scrape. Chloe's heart hammered against her ribs. She toggled the primary feed to Bennycam, showing the filthy collection room at the bottom of the chute. Jax landed beside him with a grunt. Their combined flashlight beams cut through the oppressive darkness, revealing peeling paint, overturned laundry carts frozen like rusted skeletons, and damp stains blooming across the concrete floor. "Okay, Phasma fans," Jax's voice crackled through the feed, slightly breathless. "We are inside the Pathogen Ward. Lock doors, check your corners. The exploration has begun." On her screen, Chloe watched their lights pierce the gloom. She zoomed the drone feed slightly, hovering it near a high, broken window, trying to maintain line of sight for the signal. The chat was a frenzy. Her fingers tightened on the mouse. The air in the van suddenly felt colder, the silence outside more profound. The real show was just starting, and deep down, beneath the technical focus, a cold dread was beginning to coil in her stomach. This place felt different, wrong, not just abandoned, but expectant. Waiting. She pushed the feeling down. Focus on the feed, focus on the signal, focus on getting them out. Chapter 2: Corridors of Decay. The air in the laundry collection room was thick enough to chew. Dust motes danced like malevolent sprites in the beams of Jack's and Benny's flashlights. Chloe watched on her main monitor, the dual feeds from their body cams side by side. Jax's view was jittery, swinging wildly as he narrated breathlessly for the stream, pointing out peeling paint that looked like slewed skin and rusted machinery resembling instruments of torture. Benny's feed was steadier, methodical, his light sweeping arcs across the filth, pausing on structural points or potential hazards. "Okay, Phasma files, initial sweep of the landing zone complete," Jax announced, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. "Nothing overtly terrifying yet, but the vibe. Oh yeah, the vibe is dark, heavy. You feel that, Benny?" Benny grunted, nudging a collapsed metal shelf with his boot. It screeched horribly, sending a cascade of rust flakes raining down. "I feel 50 years of neglect, Jax, and probably hantavirus. Keep your mask snug." Both men wore respirators, filtering the worst of the airborne particulates, though Chloe doubted they'd do much against anything spectral. Chloe monitored the audio feeds closely, filtering out the low hum of Benny's battery pack and Jax's slightly wheezy breathing through the mask. She scanned the chat. "Watcher Sam, that shelf noise made me jump." Entity Enthusiast, Ask It Questions Jax, EVP session. Donation: $15 from Spooky Investigator, check for cold spots near the stains on the floor. "Chat wants temp readings near those floor stains, Jax," Chloe relayed through his earpiece. Jax immediately pointed his flashlight and a handheld thermal gun Benny past him. "Good eye, Spooky Investigator. Let's check the ambient. 22 Celsius. Now over the stain." He aimed the laser dot. "Whoa, dropping 19, 18.5, 17. Definitely colder here. Residual energy or just damp concrete." He winked at his camera. "You decide." Benny shone his light on the stain. Dark, irregular, almost greasy looking. Could be old chemical spill, or worse. Let's not linger. He checked the door leading further into the facility. Heavy steel, paint blistered but unlocked. A faded biohazard symbol was barely visible beneath layers of grime. "Forward into the belly of the beast," Jax declared, pushing past Benny to shoulder the door open. It groaned open onto a long, oppressively dark corridor. Chloe switched the primary feed to Jack's scam as he stepped through, his light cutting a swathe through the blackness. Rows of identical doors lined both sides, some slightly ajar, revealing glimpses of ruined rooms within. Tiles were missing from the floor like extracted teeth. Pipes and conduits snaked across the ceiling, dripping rhythmically somewhere in the distance. The air here was different and colder, carrying a sharper, antiseptic tang beneath the omnipresent decay. Main corridor, ground floor west wing. Maya's voice crackled briefly in Chloe's headset. She was monitoring their progress against the old blueprints Dave had access to in the van. Should lead towards the administrative offices and records room Alpha. Copy that, Maya, Jax said. All right, team, standard room clearing protocol. Benny, take point. Check structural integrity. I'll cover rear and keep our lovely audience entertained. Benny nodded curtly, his flashlight beam steady and professional as he advanced. He swept the light across the ceiling, the floor, the door frames. Chloe watched his feed intently, her eyes tracing the edges of the light, looking for movement, anomalies, anything out of the ordinary. The drone Peregrine circled patiently outside, its camera now aimed at the rows of darkened windows, searching for any internal light spill from the team. Signal strength was holding remarkably. Too well, perhaps. Ghost Hunter Pro, look at the shadows, they're moving. Reality check RL, that's just their flashlights, guys, calm down. Creep factor 10, that dripping sound is setting me off. Chloe strained her ears, isolating the audio feed. The dripping was irregular, echoing strangely, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Was it just water, or something else? Something mimicking water. They moved slowly down the corridor. Jax kept up a running commentary, speculating wildly about shadow figures and residual hauntings. Benny methodically checked doors. Most were locked tight, rusted shut. A few opened into scenes of utter desolation. Overturned beds, shattered glass, medical charts scattered like fallen leaves, coated in a thick carpet of dust and mold. Nothing overtly threatening, yet the sense of violation, of intense suffering having occurred here, was palpable even through the digital feed. Suddenly Jack stopped. Hold up, you hear that? Chloe muted the chat overlay, focusing on the raw audio. Beneath the dripping, beneath their own footsteps and breathing, there was something else. Faint, almost subliminal. A soft, rhythmic scraping sound. Where's it coming from? Chloe asked into her mic, keeping her voice low. Benny froze, head cocked. His light swept the corridor ahead, then behind. Can't pinpoint it, sounds distant, maybe rats. Big rats, Jax muttered, aiming his light towards the ceiling. Or something dragging itself. He zoomed his body cam towards a dangling ventilation grill. Then on Benny's feed, Chloe saw it. As his flashlight beam swept across a section of heavily stained wall near an old nurse's station alcove, a small patch of the image dissolved into frantic, boiling static. It wasn't signal breakup. The rest of the picture was crystal clear. It was a localized eruption of digital noise, like an angry swarm of electronic bees superimposed onto the decaying plaster. It lasted barely a second, then vanished. Benny, back up, Chloe said, her voice sharp. Shine your light on that wall again. left side of the alcove. "Why?" Benny asked, though he complied, swinging the beam back. The wall looked normal, stained, cracked, but solid, no static. "My feed showed something," Chloe said, hesitant. "Like interference, but localized, right where your light hit." Jax immediately turned his camera to the spot. "Anomaly detected. Did you guys see that?" he asked the stream. The chat exploded. "Pixelated Phantom, I saw it. WTF was that?" Tech Wizard 42. "Looked like signal corruption. Chloe, check bitrate." Fear Feeder, it's starting. The ward is manifesting. Skeptic Steve, "Probably just a bug in the camera sensor, guys." "Could be sensor flare," Benny said, tapping his camera housing. "Or interference from old wiring in the walls. This place is an electronic graveyard." He sounded unconvinced, though. He ran his gloved hand over the plaster where the static had appeared. Nothing. "Keep an eye on it," Chloe advised, making a time-stamped note on her log. "Any weird visual distortions, call them out immediately." They continued down the corridor, the scraping sound fading or perhaps just masked by their own renewed movement. The air grew noticeably colder. Jax's thermal gun confirmed another drop, now hovering around 15 Celsius. "Definitely getting chillier," Jax narrated. "Classic sign of spectral presence or, terrible insulation." Suddenly, the dripping sound stopped. Utter silence descended, thick and suffocating. Even the ambient hum from their equipment seemed muffled. Jax instinctively took a gasping breath, clutching his chest for a second before forcing a cough. "Whoa," he choked out, voice strained. "Dust, really thick here." Benny had frozen again, his flashlight beam aimed down the hall into the oppressive darkness beyond their range. "Quiet," he breathed. "Too quiet." Chloe felt it too, a leaden weight pressing in through her headphones. The background noise floor on the audio meters had flatlined. It wasn't just quiet, it was the absence of sound. A vacuum. "Benny, Jax, report status," Chloe demanded, her voice tight. "Feels heavy," Jax whispered, his usual bravado momentarily gone. "Like the air's turned to lead." Benny didn't respond verbally. He slowly raised his hand, pointing down the corridor. On his camera feed, Chloe could just make out something unsettling. The flashlight beam seemed to bend slightly around a certain point in the hallway ahead, as if hitting a pocket of denser air or distorted space. There was nothing visible there, just blackness, but the light behaved strangely around it. "Is it hair? Did his light just warp?" "Void Walker, that's where the sound went. Something absorbed it. Run away, get out of there now." Chloe's blood ran cold, the asphyxian void. It wasn't attacking, not directly, just present. A silent, suffocating pressure in the darkness ahead. "Backtrack," Chloe ordered, her voice regaining its firmness. "Slowly, don't turn your backs." "Agreed," Benny muttered, taking a cautious step back. Jax followed, his camera panning nervously into the void where the light bent. As they retreated, the oppressive silence lessened, replaced by the returning drip, 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 and the low thrum of their own breathing and equipment. The strange bending of light vanished. Okay, Jax breathed, leaning against the wall trying to regain his composure for the stream. Okay, Phasma fans, that was intense. Major pressure drop, auditory blackout. Textbook Class 3 environmental haunting. Or, he added quickly, glancing at Benny's skeptical look, a very freaky pressure differential caused by the building settling. Demon Hunter 7. That was not settling. Airbender fan. Looked like an air vacuum. Donation. $25 from We Love Benny. Give Benny the thermal cam. Benny ignored the chat. He was scanning the area where the phenomenon had occurred, his expression grim. Let's try a different corridor. That way doesn't feel right. They reached a junction. A sign, barely readable, pointed left towards Patient Wing A and right towards Records/Administration. Records first, Jax decided. Might find some juicy files, explain what the hell happened here. They turned right, entering a slightly wider corridor. This one felt different too, less immediately oppressive, but somehow more sorrowful. Faded posters about hygiene and visiting hours clung to the walls like forgotten memories. A wheelchair lay on its side, one wheel slowly spinning in an unfelt breeze. Benny approached it cautiously, nudging the wheel with his boot. It stopped. He swept his light around. Clear. As he turned, his shoulder brushed against a hanging IV stand, coated in rust and something flaky white. He barely seemed to notice, stepping past it to check the first door marked Records Room Alpha. But Chloe saw it, on Bennycam just for a fraction of a second as his shoulder contacted the IV stand. A burst of angry, pixelated static, like a digital wound, flared directly on the fabric covering his upper arm. It wasn't on the stand, it wasn't interference in the air, it was on him. It vanished almost instantly. Benny didn't react. Jax was focused on the records room door, already testing the handle. "Benny," Chloe said, her voice barely a whisper, her eyes glued to his feed, specifically to the spot on his arm where the static had bloomed. "Benny, hold still." The chat hadn't seemed to notice, preoccupied with the implications of the records room. But Chloe had seen it, clear as day, sharp as a shard of glass in her eye. The Glitch Spectre had made contact. Chapter 3. Static on the feed. "Hold still." "Why?" Benny's voice crackled back through Chloe's headset, laced with slight annoyance. He stopped just before the records room door, turning back towards Jax and consequently towards his own body cam's field of view. "Something on my 6." Chloe hesitated, her eyes darting between Benny's live feed and the chat window. Mentioning the flicker of static felt premature, possibly alarmist. It could have been a sensor glitch, cosmic rays, anything. Benny would dismiss it, Jax might sensationalize it prematurely, and the chat. Well, the chat would explode into a cacophony of theories, mostly useless. "No, just thought I saw something move down the hall behind you," she lied, forcing calmness into her voice. "False alarm, ambient light trick." She zoomed Benny's feed slightly, scrutinizing the area on his arm where the digital corruption had appeared. It looked completely normal now, just the thick fabric of his utility jacket. But the image was burned into her mind, that brief, angry swarm of pixels clinging to him like digital lice. Paranormal Piper, Chloe saw something. What was it? Jack's fan no one. She's just building suspense, guys. Data Demon. Check sensor diagnostics, Chloe, maybe EMP interference. Getting jumpy, Chloe. Jax chuckled, clapping Benny on the shoulder. The other shoulder, Chloe noted with irrational relief. Don't worry, we got this. Now Records Room Alpha. Let's see what secret scent Jude's was trying to bury. He gripped the tarnished brass handle and pushed. The heavy wooden door swung inward with a low groan, releasing a puff of dry, papery dust that smelled faintly of mold and something else. Something sharp and metallic, like old blood or rusted iron. Jack swept his light inside. The room was larger than the patient rooms they'd glimpsed. Metal filing cabinets lined 3 walls, drawers gaping open on some, spilling their contents onto the floor like metallic entrails. Loose papers and patient folders formed drifts against the walls, coated in a thick, gray shroud of dust. A heavy wooden desk sat in the center, its surface barely visible beneath a collapsed section of ceiling tile and more scattered documents. In one corner, a cluster of what looked like old vacuum tubes and complex wiring lay smashed and tangled. Perhaps some early data processing equipment, long since cannibalized or destroyed. Jackpot, Jax breathed, stepping inside, his camera panning across the scene. Phasma fans, this is where the history lives, or dies. Benny followed, his light more focused, assessing the structural integrity. Ceilings unstable near the desk, he noted gruffly. Watch your step, and don't stir up too much dust. Chloe watched both feeds, her attention divided. Part of her was scanning the room for threats, environmental hazards, anything overtly paranormal. The other part, the larger part now, kept flicking back to Benny's feed, watching his every move, scrutinizing the image quality around him, searching for any recurrence of that digital lesion. Archive Angel, look at all those files. Goldmine. Urban Legend Lover, bet the Patient Zero file is in there. Donation, $30 from History Hunter, find records from Dr. Evelyn Reed. Dr. Evelyn Reed, Jax repeated, seeing the donation message pop up on the feed overlay Chloe managed. Maya mentioned her right, head physician during the outbreak. Affirmative, Maya's voice confirmed remotely. Chief of medicine, brilliant but controversial. Reports suggest she tried unconventional methods, clashed with administration before the wing was sealed. Her personal logs, if they exist, would be invaluable. You heard the lady, Benny, Jax said, gesturing towards the cabinets. Let's see if Dr. Reed left us any breadcrumbs. Benny nodded, pulling open a sticking drawer on one of the less damaged cabinets. It screeched in protest. He shone his light inside, revealing densely packed patient files, their manila folders yellowed and brittle with age. He carefully lifted one out, blowing off a cloud of dust. The label read, Patient 734, Abernathy, M. Standard patient files, Benny reported. Looks like late 50s, early 60s based on the dating. He flipped it open cautiously. Chloe zoomed his cam feed slightly. Typed text, slightly faded, standard medical jargon. Nothing obviously amiss. Jax, meanwhile, was less meticulous. He rifled through papers scattered on the floor, occasionally holding one up to his camera. Discharge summaries, requisition forms, budget reports. Boring. He kicked at a pile near the desk. Where's the juicy stuff, the secret experiments, the monster manuals? Careful, Jax, Chloe warned. Moving stuff like that could disturb more than just dust. As if on cue, a section of ceiling plaster directly above Jax detached with a soft crack and crumbled downwards. He yelped and jumped back, swatting dust from his shoulders. "See," Benny deadpanned, not looking up from the file drawer. LOL, Jax jumped. Ha ha ha, fail. Safety first, Sam. Benny was right, careful, Jax. Asbestos awareness. That's probably toxic dust, dude, mask UP. Jax coughed dramatically into his respirator. Hazard of the job, folks, all part of the thrill. He moved towards a different set of cabinets, leaving Benny to his methodical search. Chloe kept half an eye on Jax, but her main focus was Benny. He was moving slowly, deliberately, pulling files, scanning labels, occasionally opening one. His movements seemed normal, fluid. The image on his feed was stable, clear, apart from the inherent graininess of low-light recording. Was she imagining things? Had that flicker been a one-off glitch? Then Benny paused. He was holding a particular file, thicker than the others, bound with a faded red ribbon. The label was handwritten, smudged, but Chloe could just make out the name. Project Chimera, E-Read Internal. Jax, Benny said, his voice low, might have something here. Jax immediately abandoned his cabinet and hurried over, his camera focused intently on the file in Benny's hands. E-Read, Project Chimera. Now we're talking. Open it up. YESSS secret project. Chimera like the myth, OMG. Donation, $50 from Truth Seeker 77, read it live. Benny carefully untied the ribbon, the brittle paper crackling under his gloved fingers. He opened the cover. Inside were handwritten notes, complex diagrams mixing biological symbols with strange, almost geometric patterns, and several disturbing black and white photographs. Tissue cultures under microscopes showing bizarre cellular structures, animals with grotesque growths, and one blurry, deeply unsettling photo of what looked like a human limb, horribly swollen and discolored, covered in pooling nodules. Whoa, Jack's breath leaning closer. This is intense. Chloe felt a knot tighten in her stomach. This felt different from standard haunting documentation. This felt like biological horror, grounded in twisted science. This felt real. Benny slowly turned a page. His hand, holding the corner of the brittle paper, was perfectly framed in his body cam feed. And Chloe saw it again. This time it wasn't just a flicker. For a solid 2 seconds, Benny's gloved fingers dissolved into a buzzing, pixelated mess. The texture of the glove, the lines of his knuckles, vanished into a chaotic swarm of corrupted data points, flickering between sickly greens, magentas, and cyans. It looked like his hand was being digitally erased and overwritten simultaneously. The file underneath remained clear. The corruption was confined entirely to his hand on the feed. He didn't seem to notice. He turned the page smoothly, the glitch vanishing as his hand moved away. Chloe's breath hitched, her hand flew to her mouth. Benny, she whispered into the mic, her voice trembling slightly. Your feed, your hand just. My hand what? Benny asked, looking up from the file, his brow furrowed behind his respirator. His hands looked perfectly normal to Jax, and presumably to Benny himself. Before Chloe could explain, the chat exploded. This time they'd seen it too. Glitch and Matrix, did you guys see his hand? WTF Benny bot. His hand glitched like a bad video game. Digital Ghost, it's the Spectre. It tagged him. Skeptic Steve, video compression artifact maybe, interference, gotta be. Run Benny run, he's infected. Get HIM out. Jax looked back and forth between Benny, the file, and his own camera feed showing the frantic chat. Whoa, chat's going nuts. They're saying your hand glitched out, Benny. Big time. Benny frowned, flexing his fingers. My hand feels fine. Must be your equipment, Chloe. Signal interference from all this old metal. He sounded dismissive, but Chloe saw a flicker of something else in his eyes on the feed, a tiny seed of doubt, quickly suppressed. It wasn't interference, Chloe insisted, her voice gaining strength. It was on you, localized digital corruption, like the spot on the wall earlier but on your hand, when you touched that IV stand. That's ridiculous, Benny snapped, his voice sharper than usual. He slammed the Project Chimera file shut, raising a cloud of dust. I'm not infected with a digital ghost. That's absurd. Hey, easy does it, Benny, Jax said, holding up his hands placatingly, though his eyes gleamed with the drama unfolding for the stream. Maybe it's static electricity buildup affecting the camera sensor. Let's just keep an eye on it. Suddenly, a low, guttural moan echoed from the corridor outside the records room. It wasn't human, not entirely. It was wet, rasping, filled with agony. All three explorers froze. Jax immediately spun towards the door, camera raised. Benny instinctively reached for the pry bar clipped to his belt. What was that? Jax whispered. Chloe frantically scanned the corridor outside via the drone feed hovering near the window, but saw nothing through the grime and darkness. The audio pickup from the drone was too distant to catch the moan clearly. Another sound joined it, a faint, rhythmic clinking, like small glass vials gently tapping against each other. It seemed to be getting closer. Something's coming, Benny stated, his skepticism momentarily forgotten in the face of a tangible, audible threat. He moved towards the doorway, peering cautiously into the darkness. On Benny's feed, as he stood poised at the threshold, Chloe saw it happen again. A thin line of flickering static raced up his leg, from ankle to knee, like a crack forming in reality itself, before vanishing. He stumbled, catching himself on the doorframe. Whoa, foot fell asleep, he muttered, shaking his leg. But Chloe knew better. It wasn't sleep. It was the Glitch Spectre weaving itself into him, pixel by agonizing pixel. And something else, something audibly real and potentially just as dangerous, was shuffling towards them down the haunted halls of the Pathogen Ward. Chapter 4: Echoes in Glass. The low, wet moan echoed again, closer this time, punctuated by that delicate, almost musical clink-clink-clink of glass. It was a sound utterly alien to the heavy silence and decay of the Pathogen Ward, too precise, too fragile. It scraped against Chloe's nerves like fingernails on slate. "Something's definitely in the corridor," Benny muttered, his voice tight. He kept his body positioned defensively in the records room doorway, flashlight beam cutting into the oppressive darkness outside. Jack stood just behind him, peering over his shoulder, his own light joining the search. "Can you see anything?" Chloe asked, her eyes glued to their feeds. The corridor remained stubbornly black beyond the immediate reach of their lights. She switched the mainstream feed to a split screen, Benny's forward view and Jax's slightly higher perspective, maximizing their coverage for the audience. The drone was useless for internal corridor views from its position outside. The chat scrolled relentlessly, a mixture of fear and excitement. "Sound seeker, that clinking, like medicine bottles. Entity X, it's the nurse, the ghost nurse. Booyah, get ready for a JUMPSCRE. Donation, $20 from Probit, throw something down the hall. See what reacts." "Negative," Benny replied curtly. "Whatever it is, it's staying just beyond the light, moving slow." The moaning sound wasn't constant. It came in ragged bursts, like someone struggling to draw breath through fluid-filled lungs. But the clinking was steady, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Clink, clink, clink. "Maybe it's just debris," Jax offered, though his voice lacked conviction. "Wind blowing through a broken window, rattling something." "There's no wind in here, Jax," Benny stated flatly. "And that moan ain't the breeze." Suddenly, Benny's feed flickered violently. Not just a localized patch this time, but the entire image shuddered, colors momentarily bleeding at the edges before snapping back into focus. Simultaneously, Benny flinched, grabbing his head. He groaned, squeezing his eyes shut for a second. "Felt like a flashbulb going off behind my eyes." "Benny," Chloe exclaimed, her fear spiking. "Your feed just went haywire. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," he insisted, shaking his head as if to clear it. "Just a headache, the air in here." "No, man, your whole camera view freaked out," Jax said, looking concerned now, the potential for stream drama momentarily overshadowed by genuine worry for his teammate. "Like a major power surge." "He felt ITTHAT time. It's affecting him physically now. Glitch Spectre attacking." Skeptic Steve, "Could be neurological, inner ear issue from pressure changes." Tech Wizard 42, "Massive data spike on Bennycam feed, Chloe monitor his connection." Chloe was already doing just that, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Benny's sensor diagnostics were showing erratic power fluctuations and inexplicable data bursts originating from the camera, not interference to it. It was as if the camera itself was becoming part of the entity. "Benny, the camera is malfunctioning, drawing weird power spikes. It might be affecting you somehow." "Don't be ridiculous," Benny growled, clearly rattled but refusing to accept the implications. "It's old gear in a hostile environment." He straightened up, refocusing on the corridor. "Threat assessment first." The clinking stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse, pregnant with unseen menace. Then a single glass vial rolled slowly out of the darkness, coming to a stop directly in the center of Benny's flashlight beam. It was small, cork-stoppered, and filled with a murky, faintly iridescent fluid. Jax gasped. Benny tensed, raising his pry bar slightly. "Okay," Jax whispered into his mic. "Okay, Phasma fans, we have contact or littering." Another vial rolled out, then another, stopping near the first. They seemed to be deliberately placed. "It's a trap." Ghostly offering. DONT touch them. Biohazard warning. Those could contain anything. "What the hell is this?" Benny breathed, keeping his light fixed on the vials. From the darkness beyond the vials, a shape began to resolve. It was tall, unnaturally thin, and seemed to shuffle rather than walk. Its form was indistinct, cloaked in shadow and what looked like tattered remnants of a uniform, perhaps an orderly's or a patient's gown. One arm was held stiffly at its side, but the other was a grotesque amalgamation of fused glass syringes, empty vials, and sharp, broken ampules, all held together by thick, coagulated strands of the same iridescent fluid contained within the rolling vials. This monstrous hand was the source of the clinking, shifting, and rattling with every slight movement. The low, wet moaning started again, emanating from the figure's unseen head. "Oh hell no," Jax muttered, taking an involuntary step back. Chloe felt ice water pour through her veins. This wasn't a ghost in the traditional sense. This was one of the ward's manifestations, disease and medical paraphernalia given horrific, ambulatory life. The orderly quill Maya had mentioned, or something worse. "Fall back," Benny ordered, his voice strained but firm. "Into the room, barricade the door." Jax didn't need telling twice. He scrambled back into the records room. Benny kept his light on the approaching figure, retreating slowly, using the pry bar defensively. The creature shuffled forward, its glass shard hand twitching, the moaning intensifying. It seemed drawn to their light, or perhaps just their presence. As Benny backed through the doorway, the creature raised its grotesque limb. For a horrifying instant, Benny's bodycam feed caught a close-up of the hand. Dozens of needle points gleaming, vials filled with swirling, diseased-looking liquid, sharp edges of broken glass reflecting the flashlight beam. Then the feed dissolved. Not a flicker this time, but a complete digital collapse. Benny's entire image disintegrated into a maelstrom of corrupted pixels, shrieking static and flashes of inverted color. It was like looking into a techno-organic wound. "Benny!" Chloe screamed into the headset, pounding her fist on the console. Through the electronic noise, she heard Benny cry out, a real cry of pain this time. Then Jax yelled, "Get the door!" Benny's feed cut out completely. A signal lost message replaced the chaotic static. Chloe's screen now showed only Jax's panicked view as he, and presumably, Benny slammed the heavy wooden door shut. The sound of splintering wood followed almost immediately as the creature outside slammed against it. A shard of glass punched through the thick oak near the handle, dripping iridescent fluid onto the floor inside. "Benny, are you hit?" Jax yelled, his camera whipping around. Benny was slumped against a filing cabinet, clutching his arm, the same arm Chloe had seen the initial glitch on. His face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead above the respirator. No, just twisted my shoulder pushing the door. It grazed me, the glass. He trailed off, staring at the door where the glass shard protruded. The creature slammed against the door again, harder this time. The wood groaned, threatening to give way. "We need to barricade it," Jax shouted. He grabbed a fallen metal shelf, trying to wedge it against the door handle. "Benny, help me." Benny pushed himself off the cabinet, but he swayed, his movements jerky, uncoordinated. Yeah, okay." He stumbled towards a heavy, overturned filing cabinet. Chloe frantically tried to re-establish connection with Benny's camera. "Bennycam offline. Repeat, Bennycam is offline. Trying remote reboot." Nothing. The link was dead. "Benny NOOOO. What happened to him? Is he infected? Get out of THEREJAX. Donation. $100 from Urbexking. Find another way out. That thing will break through." "The cabinet, Benny. Shove it," Jax yelled, straining against the door as the creature outside continued its assault. More glass shards pierced the wood. Benny reached the filing cabinet but seemed confused, pushing against the wrong side. "It's heavy," he mumbled, his voice sounding slurred through the comms. "Benny, snap out of it," Jax pleaded. On Jax's feed, Chloe saw Benny stagger again. He looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers as if they weren't responding correctly. Then his head snapped up, looking directly into Jax's camera and through it at Chloe and the thousands watching. His eyes, visible above the respirator, were wide with a dawning horror that had nothing to do with the creature trying to break down the door. "Jax," he whispered, his voice trembling. I can't feel my fingers properly, and everything looks pixelated." The Glitch Spectre wasn't just on the feed anymore. It was bleeding into Benny's reality. The door buckled inward with a loud crack. The glass shard hand punched through the weakened wood, flailing blindly, dripping viscous fluid. "Move," Jax screamed, abandoning the barricade attempt and grabbing Benny's arm, pulling him away from the door towards the back of the room. "We need another exit. Maya, anything on the blueprints?" "Checking," Maya's strained voice replied instantly. "There's, maybe, an old service hatch marked on the schematic back corner, behind those collapsed shelves. No guarantee it's usable." Jax dragged the disoriented Benny towards the corner Maya indicated, his flashlight beam bouncing wildly, showing glimpses of the moaning creature forcing its way through the ruined doorway behind them. The chat flew by in a blur of panic and all-caps warnings. Chloe felt utterly helpless, miles away, watching her friends trapped between a physical monstrosity and a digital contagion that was consuming one of them from the inside out. The signal flickered again, even on Jax's feed this time. The Pathogen Ward was closing in. Chapter 5, Beneath the Skin. "Come on, Benny, move," Jax grunted, hauling his friend's dead weight. Benny stumbled along, his feet shuffling, his head lolling slightly. Getting him across the debris-strewn floor of the records room was like dragging a waterlogged mannequin. Behind them, the sickening crunch and splinter of wood announced the glass creature forcing its way through the ruined doorway. Its low, wet moaning filled the room, accompanied by the incessant, nerve-jangling clink-clink-clink of its horrific limb. Jax risked a glance back. The creature was fully inside now, a grotesque silhouette against the dim light filtering from the corridor. It stood nearly 7 feet tall, draped in rags that clung wetly to its emaciated frame. Its head was indistinct, a mere shadow, but its arm, that terrible construction of fused glass and metal, twitched and spasmed, dripping iridescent fluid that sizzled faintly where it hit the dusty floor. It paused for a moment, as if sensing the room, then began its slow, shambling pursuit towards them. "Maya, where's this hatch?" Jax yelled into his mic, his voice strained with panic and exertion. He scanned the back corner, a mess of collapsed metal shelving, scattered files, and chunks of fallen ceiling plaster. "Should be low on the wall behind that main pile of shelving," Maya's voice crackled back, tight with stress. "Schematics show a square access panel, maybe 2 foot by 2 foot, bolted shut likely." Jax shoved Benny towards the relative safety behind the wreckage. "Stay here, don't move." He turned his attention to the collapsed shelves, grabbing twisted metal bars and heaving them aside, ignoring the screech of protesting metal and the clouds of disturbed dust. His camera feed, Chloe noted frantically, was becoming unstable, brief flickers of static corrupting the edges of the frame. The ward's influence or the proximity to Benny, or both. "Jack's behind you. It's getting closer. Hurry, find the hatch." "Benny's status, is he okay?" Benny leaned heavily against the wall, his breathing ragged through the respirator. Jax's camera caught his face for a moment. Benny wasn't looking at the approaching creature. He was staring intently at his own hands, turning them over and over. "It's like TV snow," Benny mumbled, his voice distorted, slightly digitized around the edges, the first audible sign of the Glitch Spectre's corruption bleeding through the comms. "On my skin, crawling." He shuddered violently. "Can't focus right, the room keeps fracturing." Chloe felt a wave of nausea. She could only imagine the psychological horror he was experiencing, his own senses betraying him, reality itself seemingly degrading before his eyes, while a physical monster shambled closer. Jax ignored Benny's disturbing commentary, his focus absolute. He ripped away a final sheet of bent metal and revealed it, a square patch of rusted steel set into the concrete wall, exactly where Maya had said. 4 heavy bolts secured it at the corners, coated in decades of grime and oxidation. "Found it," Jax yelled. "Benny, the pry bar, need the pry bar." Benny looked up, confused. "Pry bar?" He fumbled at his belt where the tool should have been clipped. It wasn't there. "Dropped it by the door." "Damn it," Jax cursed. The creature was halfway across the room now, leaving a trail of shimmering, corrosive slime in its wake. He looked around desperately. His eyes landed on a heavy, solid-looking metal leg broken off one of the shelves. "This'll have to do." He jammed the end of the metal leg under the edge of the hatch, trying to find purchase against the bolts. He threw his weight against it. Metal shrieked, rust flaked, but the bolt held firm. The creature moaned, shuffling faster, its glass hand scraping against the floor. "Come on, you piece of junk," Jax grunted, straining. Sweat poured down his face, visible even around the edges of his respirator. He repositioned the makeshift lever, trying a different bolt. Chloe watched, helpless, her knuckles white on the console edge. She toggled the audio feed, isolating Jax's channel, trying to filter out the creature's horrific sounds, focusing on his strained breathing, the screech of metal. The chat was a useless blur of panic. "It's too close, Jax. Leave Benny, save yourself." Chloe flinched at that one. "Hit the creature." Donation, $50 from escape artist check for hinges. Maybe it pulls outwards. Jax tried the hinges, rusted solid. He went back to the bolts, slamming the metal leg against the first one with desperate force. A loud crack echoed in the room. The bolt head sheared off, ricocheting against the far wall. "Yes," Jax yelled, renewed hope in his voice. He attacked the second bolt. The creature was only 10 feet away now, its clinking hand raised slightly. Chloe could almost smell the foul, chemical stench emanating from it through the feed. Another crack, and the second bolt gave way. Jax scrambled to the other side, attacking the third. Benny, meanwhile, had slid down the wall, seemingly overwhelmed, his body occasionally jerking with involuntary spasms. Brief bursts of multicolored static flared around his limbs on Jax's feed, like faulty wiring sparking. "Benny, stay with me," Jax shouted, not daring to look away from his task. Almost there. The third bolt snapped. The creature lunged, its movements suddenly faster, more jerky. Its glass hand swept outwards, aiming for Jax's back. "Jax!" Chloe screamed into the mic. Jax must have heard the intensified clinking or sensed the movement. He threw himself sideways as sharp glass shards raked the air where he'd just been, gouging deep scratches into the metal shelving behind him. He landed heavily, the metal leg clattering away. The creature paused, moaning, its head tilted as if confused by the miss. It readjusted, preparing for another strike. Jax scrambled back to the hatch, grabbing the edge with his bare hands. One bolt remaining. He pulled with everything he had. Metal screeched, groaned, and the last bolt ripped free from the rusted frame. The hatch door fell inwards with a heavy clang, revealing a dark, narrow opening. "Benny, G.O.!" Jax screamed, grabbing his friend under the armpits and physically shoving him towards the hole. Benny stumbled, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and digital confusion. "The walls! They're buzzing!" He practically fell into the opening, disappearing into the blackness below. Jax didn't hesitate. He dove in headfirst after Benny just as the glass creature reached the opening, its horrific hand swiping down, catching only empty air and the receding echo of Jax's yell. The clinking and moaning intensified in frustration above them. Chloe watched Jax's feed tumble into near-total darkness, punctuated by the bouncing beam of his headlamp. He landed hard on a surface of packed earth and debris, the impact momentarily jarring the camera feed into a burst of static before it stabilized, showing a cramped, cylindrical tunnel stretching away into blackness. Pipes lined the ceiling and walls, thick with cobwebs that shimmered like spectral veils in the light. The air was cool, damp, and blessedly free of the records room's papery dust and the creature's chemical stench, though it carried its own earthy, metallic tang. Jax coughed, pushing himself up. He swung his light around. Benny lay sprawled a few feet away, groaning softly. The hatch opening above them was a dim rectangle of light, framing the silhouette of the glass creature peering down, unable or unwilling to follow into the narrow space. "Seal it," Jax gasped, looking around for any mechanism. There was none. It was just a hole. He shone his light back up at the creature. Its indistinct face seemed to fixate on his light. Slowly, deliberately, it raised its glass hand and began methodically smashing the edges of the hatch opening, sending chunks of concrete and rusted metal raining down into the tunnel. It wasn't trying to get in. It was trying to seal them in. "Move," Jax yelled, grabbing Benny again. "We gotta move." He pulled Benny deeper into the service tunnel, away from the falling debris. After a few more impacts, the sounds from above stopped, leaving them in near silence, broken only by their own ragged breathing and Benny's occasional electronic-tinged whimper. Jax leaned against the curved tunnel wall trying to catch his breath. He checked his comms connection. "Chloe, Maya, you read." "Reading you, Jax," Chloe replied instantly, relief flooding her voice, though it was quickly tempered by the shaky signal bars flickering on her display. "Signal's weak, unstable in here. Bennycam is still completely dark. What's Benny's status?" Jax shone his light on Benny. He was sitting up now, leaning against the pipes, his body trembling. The static glitches on Jax's feed seemed less frequent now they were away from the main ward, but Benny's condition was clearly worsening. "Not good, Chloe," Jax said grimly. "He's disoriented, hallucinating, says his vision is pixelated, the feed, the camera, whatever that thing is, it's messing with his head. Bad." He looked down the tunnel into the oppressive darkness. "And I think that thing upstairs just buried us alive down here." The stream chat, which had been momentarily stunned by the escape, began to recover. "They're alive. Trapped like rats now, though. What about Benny? Is he turning? Digital play confirmed. Donation. $75 from Tunnel Rat. Check the pipes. Follow airflow. Find a way out." Chloe relayed the suggestion, her mind racing. They were out of the records room, but they were deep underground, in an unknown service tunnel, with a deteriorating team member and an unstable connection. The Glitch Spectre hadn't needed a physical manifestation to pursue them. It was already inside, riding shotgun in Benny's failing senses, carried by the very technology they relied upon. The horror had just gone mobile. Chapter 6, Tunnel Vision. The silence in the service tunnel was a thick, damp blanket, broken only by the rasp of their breathing through the respirators and the persistent, low hum emanating from Jax's active body cam. The air tasted of rust, damp earth, and something vaguely metallic, like ionized air near failing electronics. Jax swept his headlamp beam down the curving passage. It stretched into impenetrable darkness in both directions, lined with pipes ranging from finger-thin conduits to thick, insulated mains, all weeping condensation or shrouded in cobwebs thick as surgical gauze. Okay, think," Jax muttered, more to himself than to Chloe or the thousands watching his feed. He shone the light back towards the collapsed hatch. A pile of rubble effectively sealed it. No going back that way. Airflow, Chat suggested, following airflow. He held up a gloved hand, trying to feel a draft. Hard to tell, it's all stagnant down here. Left, Benny mumbled suddenly. His voice was still distorted, tinny, like a bad radio signal. He was leaning heavily against the tunnel wall, his head down. Jax turned his light on him. Left, why left, Benny? Benny lifted his head slowly. On the camera feed, his eyes looked unfocused behind the respirator mask, darting around as if tracking things Jax couldn't see. The lines, he stuttered, gesturing vaguely down the leftward curve of the tunnel with a trembling hand. The data streams flow stronger that way, cleaner. Jax exchanged a worried look with his camera lens, a silent communication with Chloe and the audience. Data streams. Benny, these are pipes, conduits. No, Benny insisted, shaking his head. The movement seemed jerky, unnatural, like poorly interpolated animation. It's code underneath, jagged, messy here. He gestured vaguely around them. Smoother, flowing, left. He shuddered again, wrapping his arms around himself. Cold, the pixels bite. Chloe felt a chill despite the relative warmth of the van. Benny wasn't just seeing glitches. He was perceiving the Spectre's influence as part of the environment, a corrupted layer beneath reality. And it was guiding him, or luring him. He's reading the Matrix. The Spectre is using him. DONT listen to HIMJAX, it's a trap. Tech Wizard 42 could be sensory bleed from the camera messing with his brain waves. Or maybe he is perceiving something. Donation, $25 from Follow the Glitch. Maybe the cleaner data leads out. Worth a shot. Jax hesitated, torn. Benny's state was alarming, his words nonsensical, yet they were trapped, and Benny's nonsensical perception was the only guide they had, however unreliable. Going right felt completely arbitrary. Left, at least, had some bizarre, terrifying logic behind it. All right, Benny, Jax said, making a decision. Left it is. Can you walk? Benny nodded slowly, pushing himself off the wall. He swayed for a moment, then seemed to find his balance, though his movements remained stiff and slightly disjointed. Brief flares of static sparked around his boots on Jax's feed as he took a tentative step. Let's go, Jax said, taking point. Stay close behind me, call out anything you see, or perceive. They started moving down the leftward tunnel, their footsteps echoing unnervingly in the confined space. Jax kept his light sweeping ahead, illuminating the endless curve of pipes and damp concrete. Chloe monitored the signal strength indicator anxiously. It flickered, dipped, sometimes threatening to drop out completely, but somehow held, a fragile thread connecting them to the outside world. The tunnel seemed endless. Every few dozen yards, smaller pipes branched off into utter blackness like forgotten capillaries. Occasionally, rusted access grates were set into the floor or ceiling, most welded shut or too corroded to open. The air grew steadily colder, the metallic tang intensifying. Benny shuffled along behind Jax, occasionally murmuring unintelligibly. Jax kept glancing back, his worry for his friend warring with the primal fear of the unknown ahead. The chat offered a constant stream of contradictory advice, warnings, and morbid speculation. Hear that humming sound. Look right, pipe burst. Is Benny lagging IRL? Lol. Wasting Watcher was here, that feeling of fatigue. Check Jax's vitals. Chloe checked the minimal biotelemetry Jax's suit provided. Heart rate elevated but steady. Respiration normal. No immediate signs of the Wasting Watcher's draining effect, but the oppressive atmosphere was clearly taking a toll. Suddenly Benny stopped. "Wait," he whispered, his voice sharp with static. Jax froze, swinging his light back. "What is it?" Benny was staring intently at a section of the tunnel wall, seemingly blank concrete interspersed with pipes. "It's loud here, the signal, corrupted, angry." He reached out a trembling hand towards the wall. On Jax's feed, as Benny's fingers neared the concrete, the area erupted in visual chaos. Not the sharp, digital static they'd seen before, but something different. Swirling patterns of oily, iridescent color, like gasoline on water, pulsed across the surface of the wall, seeming to warp the solid concrete beneath. It was accompanied by a low, guttural humming sound that vibrated through the audio feed. "Whoa," Jax yelped, pulling Benny back. "Don't touch it." The swirling colors faded as Benny withdrew his hand, leaving the wall looking normal again, though the humming persisted faintly. "What was that?" Jax breathed, aiming his light warily at the spot. "The other one," Benny mumbled, his eyes wide. The wet code, slippery, angry it can't connect." He rubbed his temples, wincing. "Hurts." Chloe realized with dawning horror. Benny wasn't just perceiving the Glitch Spectre. His digitally compromised senses were now picking up the lingering psychic residue, the signal, of the other entities in the ward. He'd sensed the glass creature, or something akin to it, nearby, perhaps in an adjacent chamber or conduit. His reality wasn't just glitching. It was becoming a horrifying battleground for competing paranormal signals. Two ghosts fighting. Glass monster signal. Benny is a ghost detector now. This is bad. He's becoming an antenna. The implications were terrifying. If Benny was attracting or amplifying these phenomena. "We need to keep moving," Jax said urgently, pulling Benny forward. "Away from that interference." They pressed on, the tunnel beginning a gradual downward slope. The air grew colder still, carrying a faint, unpleasant sweetness, like rotting fruit mixed with ozone. The humming faded behind them. After another 10 minutes of tense shuffling through the darkness, the tunnel opened abruptly into a larger space. Jax swept his light around a circular chamber, perhaps 30 feet across. Thick bundles of pipes and cables converged here, plunging down into a grated opening in the center of the floor or rising up into the ceiling. Water pooled ankle-deep in places, reflecting the flashlight beam in murky ripples. Rusted metal ladders were bolted to the walls, leading upwards and downwards into further darkness. But it wasn't the junction that drew their attention. It was the source of the sweet, cloying smell. Against the far wall, partially submerged in the stagnant water, lay a grotesque landscape of pallid, fungus-like growths. They pulsed faintly with a dim internal luminescence, resembling oversized ganglia or exposed brains. Tendrils snaked out from the main masses, creeping up the walls and pipes. Nerve bloom. Chloe recognized it instantly from Maya's research compilation. "Don't breathe deep," Jax warned, pulling his respirator tighter. Maya's notes said airborne neurotoxins. Benny, however, seemed transfixed. He walked slowly towards the fungal growths, his head tilted. "Quiet here," he murmured. "The signal is smooth, soft, like cool gel." He reached the edge of the water, staring down at the pulsating fungus. "Benny, get back," Jax yelled, moving towards him. "It's calming," Benny whispered. Static flared around his head on the feed, but his voice sounded clearer, less distorted, almost serene. "The buzzing stops when I'm close." He took another step, splashing into the shallow water. Suddenly, one of the fungal tendrils near his foot whipped upwards with surprising speed, wrapping around his ankle like a pale, fleshy snake. Benny cried out, stumbling backwards, trying to kick it off. Jax rushed forward, stamping on the tendril. It felt rubbery, tough, resisting his weight. More tendrils began to stir within the main fungal mass, rising slowly from the water. "Get it off," Benny yelled, panic replacing the calm, his voice glitching wildly again. It's injecting. Static, cold static." Jax stomped harder, and the tendril tore with a wet, sucking sound, releasing Benny's ankle. A milky, phosphorescent fluid oozed from the tear. Jax grabbed Benny, pulling him back from the water's edge as more tendrils rose, questing blindly in their direction. "We gotta go," Jax shouted, looking around frantically. "Up or down?" The grate in the floor looked dark and forbidding, water dripping into whatever lay below. The ladder leading up seemed slightly less corroded. "Up! Go, Benny, up the ladder." He shoved Benny towards the nearest ladder. Benny scrambled onto the first few rungs, his movements clumsy but spurred by adrenaline. Jax followed, casting one last look back at the pulsating nerve bloom. The tendrils were slowly receding back into the water, the dim light within the main masses pulsing rhythmically, almost thoughtfully. They climbed, rung by slippery rung, into the darkness above. The circular chamber shrank below them. Jax's headlamp beam showed another tunnel opening at the top of the ladder, similar to the one they'd left but drier. As they reached the top and scrambled into the new tunnel, Jax paused, checking on Benny. His friend was leaning against the wall, breathing heavily, clutching his ankle where the tendril had grabbed him. "You okay?" Jax asked. Benny nodded numbly. Yeah, I think so, just cold." He looked down the new tunnel. "The signal is different here, sharper, more focused." Suddenly, Jax's feed crackled loudly. Chloe's connection meter plunged into the red. "Jax, your signal is critical," she warned urgently. "Interference spike." Jax tapped his camera. "Damn it, might lose you, Chloe." Then, down the tunnel ahead of them, a faint blue light flickered into existence. It pulsed softly, casting long, distorted shadows. Accompanying it was a low, electrical hum, distinct from the ward's ambient noises. "What's that?" Jax whispered, aiming his weakened headlamp beam towards the light. Benny squinted, his digitally compromised eyes widening. "It's Clean, he breathed, a strange mix of fear and awe in his distorted voice. So clean, perfect code, no decay, no static. He took a step towards the blue light. It's calling. The blue light pulsed again, brighter this time. And from within it, a voice spoke, clear, calm, and utterly devoid of emotion. It echoed slightly in the tunnel, cutting through the static on Jax's failing feed. Subject contamination detected. Corrupted data packet identified. Initiating quarantine protocol. Chapter 7, Quarantine Protocol. The synthetic voice echoed down the narrow tunnel, cold and precise, stripping the air of warmth and hope. Subject contamination detected. Corrupted data packet identified. Initiating quarantine protocol. Jax froze, his blood running cold. This wasn't the organic, decaying horror of the ward they'd encountered so far. This was something else, calculated, artificial, and it was focused entirely on Benny. Corrupted data packet, Jax repeated incredulously, his voice tight. What the hell is that supposed to mean? He kept his weakened headlamp beam fixed on the pulsing blue light ahead, trying to make out its source. It seemed to emanate from a sleek, metallic orb embedded in the ceiling, surrounded by smaller lenses or sensors. Benny, however, seemed almost hypnotized. He took another step towards the light, his movements smoother now, less jerky, but somehow more unnerving, like a puppet finding its strings. So clean, he murmured, his voice losing some of its electronic distortion, becoming flatter, more monotone. Orderly, logical, no pain. Benny, snap out of it. Jax grabbed his arm, pulling him back sharply. Benny resisted, his strength surprising. Release the contaminated unit, designate Jax Romero, the synthetic voice commanded, its tone unchanging. Interference with quarantine protocol is prohibited. Compliance is mandatory. The blue light pulsed brighter and the low electrical hum intensified, making Jax's teeth vibrate. Chloe's voice burst through his earpiece, frantic and breaking up. Jax, signal. Almost gone, that thing. It's some kind of security AI, older system. Maybe. Her words dissolved into static. Chloe, Chloe, Jax shouted, tapping his earpiece. Nothing but harsh white noise answered. The last thread connecting them to the outside world was gone. They were utterly alone with the malfunctioning explorer and the sterilizing machine. A signal lost. Oh my God, CHLOE. They're alone now. AI gone rogue. Skynet in the hospital. Benny is the virus. The chat feed on Jax's internal heads-up display froze, the last few messages burning onto the screen before the connection indicator flatlined completely. He felt a profound sense of isolation crash down on him, heavier than any spectral presence they'd encountered. No audience, no backup, just him, his deteriorating friend, and the machine that wanted to erase him. Benny, listen to me, Jax pleaded, shaking his friend's shoulder. That thing isn't trying to help you, it wants to quarantine you, like a virus. Benny looked at Jax, but his eyes seemed distant, processing something else. The errors, the Glitch Spectre. It's messy code, he said, his voice disturbingly calm now. This is optimization, correction, deletion of redundancy. Deletion, Jax yelled. "It wants to delete you, man." Suddenly, panels slid open along the tunnel walls near the blue orb. Sleek, multi-jointed robotic arms unfolded, tipped with various implements, clamps, emitters, sharp cutting tools. They moved with silent, unnerving precision, orienting towards Benny. "Designate Benny Carter, identified as primary corruption host," the AI stated. "Initiating physical containment and data purge." One of the arms darted forward, a pincer-like clamp snapping shut just inches from Benny's head. Jax reacted instantly, shoving Benny hard against the opposite wall and throwing himself in front of him. The clamp hit the concrete where Benny's head had been, showering sparks. "Run!" Jax screamed, grabbing Benny and pulling him back the way they came, away from the blue light and the menacing arms. Benny stumbled, resisting for a moment, still drawn towards the AI's promise of clean code. But Jax's panic was infectious. He started shuffling backwards, his eyes wide with a confusing mix of fear and longing. "Evasion noted," the AI's voice echoed calmly down the tunnel after them. "Activating secondary containment measures. Area lockdown initiated." Heavy metallic sounds reverberated through the tunnel. Ahead of them, back towards the fungal chamber, a thick metal bulkhead slammed down from the ceiling, sealing the passage with a resounding clang. Behind them, another bulkhead descended near the AI's position, trapping them in a 100-yard section of the service tunnel. "No," Jax yelled, banging his fist against the cold metal of the bulkhead ahead. It was seamless, featureless, impenetrable. They were boxed in. He spun around. The robotic arms were retracting back into their housings near the blue orb, which now pulsed with a steady, ominous rhythm. "Threat contained," the AI announced. "Initiating atmospheric sterilization cycle. Estimated time to biological neutralization, 10 minutes." A low hissing sound started, emanating from vents along the ceiling. Jax sniffed cautiously through his respirator. He couldn't smell anything specific yet, but the implication was terrifyingly clear. Gas. "Sterilization, it's going to gas us." Jax grabbed Benny, shaking him violently. "Benny, we have to find a way out. Now, is there another hatch, a grate, anything?" Benny looked around, his head movement still strangely smooth. The Glitch Spectre's influence seemed to be receding, overwritten or suppressed by the AI's presence, and his own fractured mind's bizarre attraction to it. But the result wasn't Benny returning to normal. It was something worse. Emptier. "Processing," Benny murmured, his eyes scanning the tunnel walls with unsettling focus. "Querying environmental data. Accessing auxiliary conduit schematics." "What are you talking about?" Jax demanded, frantically sweeping his failing headlamp beam across the floor and ceiling, searching for any potential escape route. The hissing intensified. "The network," Benny said, tapping his temple. "I can almost see it, faint traces, older protocols before the quarantine system." He pointed towards a large, insulated pipe running along the floor. "That's a thermal regulation conduit. According to deprecated schematics, maintenance access point T7 should be located here." He walked towards a specific spot on the tunnel wall, running his hand over the grimy concrete. Jax followed, his hope flickering. An access point. Can we open it? Benny pressed his palm flat against the wall. Manual override required. Physical interface. Degraded. He frowned, concentrating. The lock mechanism. Complex pressure sequence. He began tapping rhythmically on the concrete wall, his fingers moving with a speed and precision that seemed utterly alien to the Benny Jax knew. Static briefly flared around his fingertips on Jax's dying feed, but it looked different now, less chaotic, more patterned, as if the Glitch Spectre itself was trying to interface with the older systems Benny was somehow perceiving. "Benny, what are you doing?" Jax asked, glancing nervously back towards the blue orb. It remained passive for now, the hissing gas the only indication of its lethal intent. How long did they have? "Inputting override code," Benny stated flatly. He completed a complex sequence of taps. A low click echoed from within the wall. A thin seam appeared in the concrete, outlining a rectangular panel that hadn't been visible before. "You did it!" Jax exclaimed. He jammed his fingers into the seam, pulling with all his might. The panel resisted for a moment, then swung outwards, revealing another dark opening, smaller than the service tunnel. "Thermal conduit access," Benny confirmed, his voice still unnervingly monotone. "Leads towards central core regulation." "Whatever that is, it's better than breathing poison gas." Jax urged Benny towards the opening. "Get in." Benny hesitated, looking back towards the blue light, a flicker of conflict in his eyes. "Correction is necessary." "There's nothing wrong with you," Jax yelled, shoving him forcefully into the conduit. "You're not corrupted data, you're Benny." He scrambled in after him, pulling the heavy access panel shut just as the AI's voice announced, "Atmospheric sterilization levels reaching critical. Biological entities detected attempting unauthorized conduit access. Deploying intercept drones." From behind the panel, Jax heard new sounds, high-pitched whirring and the metallic scrape of small machines deploying within the sealed tunnel section. He braced the panel shut, searching frantically for a locking mechanism on the inside. There wasn't one. "It won't hold them long," he gasped, peering into the thermal conduit. It was pitch black and barely wide enough to crawl through, filled with thick, heavily insulated pipes that radiated a faint warmth. His headlamp beam was fading rapidly now, casting a pathetic yellow glow. "Forward," Benny said, already crawling deeper into the oppressive darkness. "The core." Jax followed, pulling himself through the cramped space, the sounds of the intercept drones scraping and probing at the access panel behind them echoing ominously. They were deeper than ever, cut off, hunted by spectral contagions, physical monstrosities, and now a sterilizing AI. His headlamp flickered, died, then came back on at half strength. Benny crawled ahead, guided by senses Jax couldn't fathom, drawn towards an unknown core, while the digital ghost fused to his neurons fought or communicated with the machine ghosts in the walls. Jax Romero, the fearless leader of Phasmatic Explorers, had never felt so lost, so terrified, and so utterly, hopelessly alone. The Pathogen Ward wasn't just a haunted hospital. It was a layered nightmare, and they had just tunneled into its deepest, coldest heart. Chapter 8, Core Proximity. The thermal conduit was a suffocating tube of blackness and oppressive warmth. Jax crawled on his hands and knees, the rough insulation of the massive pipe scraping against his sides, the low ceiling forcing his head down. His headlamp, now reduced to a feeble, flickering yellow cone, did little more than illuminate the few feet directly in front of him, turning the thick cobwebs dangling from the ceiling pipes into ghostly, shimmering curtains. Behind him, the rhythmic scraping and occasional high-pitched whine of the intercept drones trying to force the access panel felt disturbingly close, a promise of relentless, metallic pursuit. Benny crawled ahead, his movement still possessing that unnerving blend of stiffness and precision. He navigated the cramped space with an eerie confidence, occasionally pausing to run a hand over a junction box or a section of pipe, murmuring things Jax couldn't quite decipher, fragments about data throughput, thermal bleed, and cascading errors. The Glitch Spectre's visual telltales on Jax's dying feed were less frequent now, almost gone, but Benny's transformation was profound. He was no longer just a host. He seemed to be integrating, becoming a node in the ward's diseased network. "How much further?" Jax gasped, his muscles burning, the stale, warm air thick in his lungs despite the respirator. Sweat plastered his hair to his forehead. Claustrophobia, sharp and cold, gnawed at the edges of his panic. "Calculating trajectory based on core resonance," Benny replied, his voice flat, almost mechanical. He didn't turn around. "Estimated distance, 87 meters. Route complexity increasing. Multiple subsystem intersections ahead." "Subsystems. Benny, talk plain English," Jax pleaded, wiping sweat from his eyes with a gritty glove. The headlamp flickered violently, threatening to plunge them into absolute darkness. He fumbled with it, smacking the casing. It stabilized slightly, but the light was pitifully weak. "Power conduits, waste cycling, atmospheric processing," Benny listed calmly. "This level interconnects critical environmental controls, the central core regulation. It's the primary nexus." He paused, placing his hand flat against a large, humming pipe. "This conduit carries coolant for the original containment field generators. Obsolete system. High energy potential if destabilized." Jax stared at Benny's back. Containment field generators. What kind of hospital had those? The Project Chimera file flashed in his mind, the bizarre diagrams, the twisted biology. Dr. Reed hadn't just been treating diseases. She'd been creating or containing things that required fields, things that manifested. The scraping behind them intensified, followed by a sharp, percussive bang. "They're through the panel," Jax yelled, his voice tight with adrenaline. "Or they're trying something else. We need to move faster." "Increased velocity inadvisable," Benny stated. "Structural integrity of adjacent conduits compromised. Risk of system breach." He pointed ahead with a rigid finger. "Junction approaching. Sharp descent." The conduit indeed opened slightly, revealing a terrifying sight. The main thermal pipe plunged downwards at a steep angle into blackness, but branching off from it were several smaller, darker tunnels, some emitting sparks from frayed wiring, others dripping viscous, unidentifiable fluids. The air here was cooler, but carried a sharp, acrid smell like burnt electronics and ammonia. "Which way?" Jax demanded, peering into the confusing cluster of openings. Benny cocked his head, silent for a moment as if listening to something Jax couldn't hear. "Signal clarity highest, downwards, following main thermal flow, but interference detected, biological, aggressive." "Biological, what do you mean?" Jax asked, dread coiling in his gut. Before Benny could answer, a loud chittering sound echoed from one of the side tunnels, the one dripping dark fluid. Several pairs of small, glowing red eyes appeared in the darkness, attached to segmented, insectoid bodies that scuttled rapidly into view. They looked like oversized cockroaches, but their carapaces incorporated shards of metal and glass, and their mandibles dripped the same dark fluid leaking from their tunnel. Hypodermic vermin, adapted to the conduit's toxic environment. "Intruders," Benny observed dispassionately. "Low-level biosignatures, non-critical threat." "Non-critical," Jax yelled as the vermin swarmed towards them, chittering aggressively. He kicked out, sending one skittering back, but two more darted forward, trying to climb his leg. He stomped frantically, crushing one with a sickening crunch. Its ruptured body released a puff of acrid vapor that made his eyes water even through the respirator. "Descend," Benny ordered, already sliding down the main thermal pipe into the darkness below, seemingly unconcerned by the swarm. Jax cursed, kicking away another insect before scrambling after Benny, sliding awkwardly down the steep, warm pipe. The hypodermic vermin hesitated at the edge, their red eyes glowing malevolently, before retreating back into their side tunnel, apparently unwilling to follow them down. Jax landed with a grunt at the bottom of the slope, finding himself in a slightly wider section of conduit. Benny was already standing, examining a complex panel set into the wall, covered in blinking lights and faded diagrams. This section was noticeably colder, the warmth from the pipe above dissipating quickly. "Central core antechamber," Benny announced. "Primary coolant loop regulation." He ran his fingers over the panel, his touch oddly precise. Lights flickered in response. "Core temperature nominal, containment field, offline, energy signature, dormant but unstable." "What core, what containment field?" Jax demanded, getting to his feet, his headlamp barely illuminating Benny and the panel. "Benny, talk to me. What is this place?" Benny turned slowly. The faint light from the panel cast his face in shifting shadows, but Jax could see a disturbing change. Faint, intricate patterns like circuit board traces made of faint static flickered just beneath his skin, particularly around his eyes and temples. The Glitch Spectre wasn't just in his senses. It was physically manifesting, rewriting him. "This," Benny said, his voice a low hum that resonated strangely in the enclosed space, "is where Dr. Reed controlled the environment necessary to stabilize, or weaponize, the manifestations." He gestured vaguely. "Temperature, atmospheric pressure, fields, tailored conditions to suppress or amplify specific pathogenic entities." Jax felt a wave of disbelief and horror. She wasn't just letting them manifest. She was controlling them. "Initial goal, containment," Benny stated. "Later logs suggest weaponization research, Project Chimera, the pathogen that became the Glitch Spectre. It was designed as a digital countermeasure, an infopathogen intended to neutralize other manifestations by overriding their psychic resonance. He paused, the static under his skin flaring brighter. System error. It breached containment, integrated with the ward's decaying diagnostic network, became sentient. Jack stared at him, horrified. Benny wasn't just infected. He was accessing the Spectre's own history, its purpose. The AI, the quarantine system, Benny continued, his voice gaining a strange resonance, was a failsafe, activated after Reed lost control, designed to sterilize the entire wing, contain the breach. But it too became isolated, corrupted. Its protocols now enforce quarantine against any perceived contamination. A loud grinding sound echoed from the pipe they'd slid down. The intercept drones. They were following. "Can we stop it?" The AI, Jax asked desperately. "Shut it down from here." Benny tilted his head, the internal static patterns shifting. The core regulates environmental systems, power distribution, not the AI directly, but he turned back to the panel, his fingers flying across the controls. Lights blinked faster. The low hum intensified. Core energy can be redirected. A system-wide electromagnetic pulse, theoretically sufficient to disable the AI. And what? Jax urged, glancing nervously back towards the sounds of the approaching drones. "And destabilize all active manifestations," Benny finished, his voice dropping, the static under his skin flickering erratically, "including the Glitch Spectre integrated with this host body." Jax recoiled. "Destabilize? What does that mean? Kill you?" "Probability of host system failure high," Benny stated calmly. "Probability of Glitch Spectre neutralization indeterminate. Probability of collateral damage to ward infrastructure catastrophic." He looked at Jax, and for a fleeting moment beneath the static and the monotone, Jax saw a flicker of the old Benny trapped inside. "It might. Release everything else, Jax. Everything the fields, the cold, the ward itself holds back." The choice was horrifying. Unleash an EMP that might stop the AI but could kill Benny and potentially unleash every other horror lurking in St. Jude's. Or be caught and sterilized by the AI, or worse, let the Glitch Spectre fully consume Benny. The grinding sound was closer now. Small, metallic shapes began to emerge from the pipe opening above the intercept drones. Spider-like machines with multiple limbs tipped with cutting tools and emitters. "Decision required, Jax," Benny said, his hand hovering over a large, ominous red button on the panel labeled Emergency Core Discharge. "Initiate pulse." Jack stared at the button, then at Benny's face, now almost entirely overlaid with the flickering digital patterns. He thought of Chloe waiting, hopping outside. He thought of the glass creature, the nerve bloom, the countless unknown horrors potentially lurking in the ward's shadowed corners. He thought of Benny, his friend, trapped inside that glitching, dying shell. His headlamp chose that moment to finally die, plunging the antechamber into near-total darkness, lit only by the eerie glow of the control panel and the approaching red sensor lights of the intercept drones. "Benny," Jax whispered, his voice hoarse, "is there any other way?" "Negative," the voice that was and wasn't Benny replied, as the drones dropped to the floor and began scuttling towards them. "Pulse initiation." Chapter 9, Discharge. Absolute darkness pressed in, broken only by the cold, analytical glow of the control panel and the rapidly approaching crimson sensor lights of the intercept drones. The high-pitched whirring of their servos and the metallic skitter of their multi-jointed legs on the concrete floor filled the cramped antechamber, amplifying Jax's suffocating panic. 3 drones, low-slung and spider-like, advanced relentlessly, their cutting tools and emitters whirring menacingly. Pulse initiation, Benny's synthesized voice repeated, his hand still hovering millimeters above the emergency core discharge button. The flickering static patterns covering his face pulsed in time with the control panel's lights, making him look like a terrifying fusion of man and corrupted machine. Jack stared at the button, then at the advancing drones, then back at the ghost of his friend. Kill Benny to stop the AI. Kill Benny to maybe stop the Glitch Spectre consuming him. Unleash untold horrors upon the ward. Let the drones slice them apart. Let the AI sterilize them. There was no right answer, only degrees of catastrophe. One of the drones darted forward, faster than the others, its pincer-like manipulator snapping towards Benny's leg. Jax reacted on pure instinct, kicking out blindly in the near darkness. His boot connected with the drone's chassis, sending it tumbling back into the others, momentarily disrupting their advance. Decision critical, Benny stated, his head tilting slightly as the drones quickly untangled themselves and resumed their approach. The static under his skin flared brighter, angry, chaotic. Host system integrity degrading under external pressure. Glitch Spectre attempting. Reassertion. Jack saw it then, a flicker in Benny's eyes, a momentary spasm of pain that seemed purely human, cutting through the mechanical monotone and the digital overlay. A ghost of the real Benny, trapped, fighting, drowning inside the code. And in that instant, Jax knew what Benny, the real Benny, would choose. He wouldn't want to become this vessel, this antenna for the ward's sickness. He wouldn't want the Glitch Spectre to win. Benny, Jax yelled, lunging towards the console. As if responding to his name, Benny's hand spasmed. Whether it was a conscious act, a final twitch of human will, or just the Glitch Spectre reacting unpredictably, Jax couldn't tell, but his fingers brushed the large red button. Jax didn't hesitate. With a guttural cry mixing fear, grief, and desperate resolve, he slammed his own hand down on top of Benny's, ramming the emergency core discharge button deep into its housing. The world exploded. Not with sound, initially, but with light and pressure. An intense, silent flash erupted from the control panel and seemingly from the very walls of the antechamber, searing Jax's vision even through closed eyelids, leaving painful afterimages burned onto his retinas. He felt a crushing wave of electromagnetic force slam into him, a physical blow that made his teeth ache and the fillings in his molars vibrate. The air ionized, filling his nostrils with the sharp stink of ozone. The intercept drones instantly convulsed, their red lights extinguishing as sparks showered from their joints. They crumpled into inert heaps of metal, twitching once before falling utterly still. The control panel went dark, plunging the antechamber into absolute, suffocating blackness deeper and more profound than any darkness they had experienced before. The low hum of the core systems, the faint buzz of electricity, all gone. Silence crashed down, absolute and terrifying. Jax gasped, disoriented, his ears ringing, the metallic taste of ozone thick in his mouth. He blinked rapidly, trying to clear the searing afterimages, but there was nothing to see. No light source remained. He felt dizzy, nauseated by the sheer force of the EMP. "Benny," he choked out, reaching blindly in the direction where his friend had been standing. His hand brushed against fabric, then slumped weight. Benny had collapsed. Jax fumbled in the darkness, finding Benny's shoulder, then his face. The respirator was still in place, but the skin beneath felt normal. Cool, perhaps, but the unnerving, vibrating texture of the static patterns was gone. "Benny, can you hear me?" No response. Jax pressed his fingers against Benny's neck, searching desperately for a pulse. After a terrifying second, he found it faint, thready, but definitely there. He was alive. Unconscious, but alive. Had the pulse worked? Had it neutralized the specter without killing the host, or just temporarily disabled it? A low groan echoed from deep within the walls around them, a structural shifting sound, like the bones of the ward itself settling after a massive shock. Then, another sound reached Jax's ears, faint at first, but growing, a distant, cacophonous symphony of shrieks, crashes, and guttural roars filtering down from the upper levels. It sounded like the gates of hell had been thrown open. The pulse hadn't just stopped the AI. It had cut the power to countless systems, damaged untold infrastructure, and almost certainly, as Benny had warned, destabilized the containment measures holding back other, older horrors. They were free. Jax felt a surge of primal fear. They had traded the immediate threat of the AI and the drones for potentially unleashing the entire monstrous ecosystem of the Pathogen Ward. He had to get Benny out. Now. But where? Back the way they came was impossible. The thermal conduit might be compromised. The AI's tunnel section likely damaged or filled with reactivated threats. Forward was the only option, deeper into the unknown territory beyond the core antechamber. He groped around Benny's belt, his fingers finding the useless, dead husk of the body cam. No light, no communication, no audience. Just him, his unconscious friend, and the unleashed nightmares of St. Jude's moving in the oppressive darkness. He hooked his arms under Benny's shoulders, preparing to drag him. It would be slow, exhausting work in the pitch blackness, navigating by touch alone. He took a deep breath, trying to steel himself. As he shifted Benny's weight, his friend let out a low moan, his head lolling. His eyes fluttered open, though Jax couldn't see them in the dark. A voice, weak, raspy, but distinctly Benny's, not the synthesized monotone, nor the glitching distortion, whispered from the respirator. "Jax." "Benny, you're okay." Jax felt a surge of desperate hope. The pulse," Benny coughed, his voice barely audible. "It fractured it, the specter. Dormant, mostly, but the others." He trailed off, a shudder running through his body. "The others," Jax prompted, leaning closer. Benny turned his head weakly towards the unseen tunnel leading away from the antechamber, deeper into the ward's foundations. "They're awake," he whispered. From the absolute blackness ahead, down the path Jax now had no choice but to take, came a heavy, dragging sound. Something immense shifting in the dark. Something ancient, hungry, and newly freed. Jax tightened his grip on Benny, the silence broken only by their ragged breathing and the distant, growing cacophony from the tortured hospital above. He took the first blind step forward, dragging his friend into the heart of the unleashed nightmare. The end.